Station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
I am ready for the event.
Bullock, Texas State History Museum, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Station, this is Bullock, Texas State History Museum. How do you hear me?
I hear you loud and clear. How about me?
Perfect. Tim, I'm going to hand you over to James McReynolds, our Public Programs Manager, and take it from there.
Hi, Tim. This is James. Thanks for joining us.
Sounds great.
Sounds great.
It's my pleasure, James.
Well, we've got 14 really excited kids here that want to ask you some questions, but before we do that, can you briefly tell us about your background and your current mission?
Absolutely. You know, I've been here for about 2 months, but it's actually been a very long path to get here. I started out working as an Army aviator many years ago, and then after serving a couple of tours, I became an experimental test pilot, went to graduate school, and then had the opportunity to work at NASA. And then in 2000, I was selected as an astronaut, and I worked for 9 years as an astronaut until my first flight. And I came actually here to this International Space Station in 2009. And I'm very blessed to have this opportunity to come back here and serve on the International Space Station. I'm a crew member right now in Expedition 46. I'll be the commander of Expedition 47 in a few weeks. Our mission here is really to run this world-class orbiting laboratory. We have over 200 experiments going on at any one time, and there are a variety of experiments. Sometimes we're actively conducting the experiment. Other times we set this up and the scientists on the ground conduct the experiment, and then other times we're actually the experiment itself. We have to maintain this facility because it's very, very complex. Our environment here is exactly what we have. It's not like Earth in that respect. And it's also our home, so we have to maintain our home as well. It's also very important that we maintain our bodies and our health too, and so we exercise over 2 hours every day. And so this is an absolutely wonderful place to live and work.
Exciting. I think you're inspiring some of our students to become astronauts right now. Let's get to some of the questions. Are you ready?
I am all set. I'm really looking forward to these questions.
Hello, my name is Jomira Haas, and my question is, how did it feel when you first made it into space?
Hi, Jamara. That's a great question. You know, there's a physical response and there's also an emotional response, right? So when I first got to space, I was so happy because it had been a long time and a lot of work to get on board both the space shuttle and then the International Space Station on my first flight. Physically, though, when I first came to space the first time, I didn't feel so good. I was a little bit queasy and a little bit dizzy. But the amazing thing about the human body is that we're able to adapt to our environment. And so after a few days, I felt really, really good. This time around, I think I was even happier to be back on board. But also, I think that I adapted quicker because my body just remembered having been here before.
Okay, and our next question is going to come from Peyton. Peyton, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, my name is Peyton Mata, and my question is, how does Earth look in space?
Well, Peyton, it's a great question. You know, it's a very, very beautiful planet. But, you know, I think it's kind of funny that we call it Earth because it's mainly water. When we pass around the planet, most of the time we're looking at the oceans. In fact, I think just about now we're coming over land, but the last several minutes we've been over the Atlantic Ocean. We're going over the United Kingdom. By the time we finish up here today, we'll be going over the Caspian Sea. But it is a beautiful, beautiful planet. It's very dynamic. There's lots of different colors, and sometimes the colors are so dynamic it almost doesn't even look real, but it is a beautiful thing to look at.
Hi, my name is Eileen, and my question is, What kind of work do you do every day while in space?
Oh, it's a good question. You know, we're very, very busy here, and so we spend about maybe a third of our time doing science experiments, about a third maintaining this vehicle, and maybe a third exercising. So we're very busy on board. So, for example, today I was working on an experiment where we burn some items, which is very interesting on a space station. But we have a very special glove box that makes everything safe. And so we would insert these samples inside, I'll get a little bit closer, we insert these inside a chamber, and then we would burn these samples. And what that is for is the scientists on the ground, they can understand better what happens to materials in space if they were to get on fire. And so they change the speed of the airflow and use different materials, and from that they can learn all kinds of things. And so I've been the helper to the scientists in a lot of respects for that. And so also we maintain the vehicle, and we have lots of tools. Here's an example of some of the tools we have. You know, we become the plumber and the electrician and the mechanic here on board Space Station because there's only 6 of us, and we're the guys who have, and gals, who have to take care of this place. And so we have special procedures that are prepared on the ground, and from those procedures and our training with the tools, we're able to maintain the vehicle and keep things in working order. And we have lots of spare parts too if something were to break. And then also we exercise every day. And, you know, one of the weird things, I think, is that we actually run in space. And so the question is, well, how do you run if there's no gravity, right? Because we're floating. And if you're floating all the time, how do you get back down on the ground in order to do your running? So we have this special harness that we put on. And I'm not going to put the whole thing on, but you can see how it works. You put this harness on, and then we attach bungee cords that pull us down to a treadmill, and that allows us to run. And it's very important for us to put load on our muscles and our bones to keep us strong for when we come back home.
My name is Jamil Garcia, and my question is, how do you entertain yourself in space?
You know, we have just a little bit of free time, but we do use that time to entertain ourselves. I think my favorite thing to do on Space Station is go to one of the windows we have here and take photographs, because it's just unbelievable how beautiful this planet is. This is one of my favorite cameras here. This has an 800 millimeter lens, and so with this camera, I can take really good photographs of the planet. In fact, recently I took a photograph of my neighborhood. I was just lucky enough to get a good photograph that came out clearly, and we were in the right position with the space station in order for me to take that photograph. So taking pictures, one of my favorite things to do here on Space Station. You know, we also have movies and television shows that we can watch. They're stored up here, or they can be sent up. And, you know, just like many of you, I have an iPad, and my iPad goes with me all the time. We use this for work quite a bit. We have essentially our schedule on here, and we use it for that. But then also we could watch movies. I read a book on here on my Kindle reader. So those are really the main things that we do in our free time. And of course, we have meals together, and we sit around a table, and we really don't sit, do we? We kind of float around the table and hold on with our feet. But we have different meals, and here's an example of the kind of food that we eat on board. They're all in packets like this, and some of the packets we reconstitute. They're dehydrated, and so we have to fill them with hot water on occasion. But this is some banana pudding. I thought it might be interesting to see what food looks like in space. So it kind of comes out, and so that's why we use a spoon. We have to be very careful, because otherwise we can make a really big mess.
Hi, my name is Sisto, and what is it like just floating in midair?
You know, I think floating is about as cool a thing as you could possibly do. I mean, you're just floating around in space, and it feels so different than when you're in gravity, and it takes a little bit of time to get used to this feeling of floating. And what's interesting too is that your body doesn't really assume the same position that you normally would. Like when I completely relax, this is what I look like. My arms kind of float up, my legs come up a little bit. But I think the way that it feels is probably like when you're in the pool and you go to the middle of the pool and you just kind of, float there in the middle. It feels like that, but the difference is that there's no water to push against. So that's the main difference.
My name is Itzel, and my question is, how do you communicate with NASA?
Well, that's a good question. We have a handheld mic, and we press this button, and then that transmits our voice down to the ground through a series of satellites, and they do the same thing. It's like talking on a phone, but we have to take turns. I press the button and talk, then we stop and we wait and listen. It's just like what pilots do when they talk to the ground.
Hi, my name is Diana, and my question is, what is the most important things you need in space?
We know it's very, very important for us to have technical skills because we have a very technical job up here. And so it's really key that we have some skills so that we can maintain this vehicle. So that's very important. But you know what? I think the most important thing is being able to get along with people, because flying in space is completely a team sport. It's not just a team here, but there's a huge team on the ground of people that help us do this. And we're the ones that are most visible, and I get to talk to you guys and gals, but there's an army of people on the ground that are helping make human spaceflight possible. So it's so important that we're able to get along with people.
Hello, my name is Leonardo. My question is, what's the hardest part living in the space station?
You know, I think the hardest part on Space Station, Leonardo, is keeping track of stuff. Let me give you an example. So I'm convinced that if I were to carry more than 3 things in my hand at a time, I am going to lose one of those items. So say I have like these 3 pens and I'm looking around and all of a sudden I can't, oh my goodness, there goes my pen. And so you have to be very careful about how you take care of your things. And what that means is that you just work differently. You have to make sure that you're always planning where things are located and where you put them down, because they don't just sit on the table. They could sit on the wall or on the ceiling, or they could just float behind one of these racks here. And so it's important for us to keep track of our things. I think that's the hardest part.
Hi, my name is Sonia. What kind of problems come up during a mission?
Well, this is a laboratory, and it's also full of equipment. And you know what happens with equipment over time is sometimes it wears out, and sometimes it just breaks. And so those are the kinds of problems that we have to deal with on board. In fact, we had a problem with a break on a mechanism outside when we first came on board. And so we had been on space station for 6 days when we had to go do a spacewalk and fix that. And then a couple weeks later, we had to do another spacewalk in order to fix a piece of electrical equipment so that we could gain energy from our solar arrays. And so we had to do these spacewalks, which is a lot of organization and work for us to put together in order to do. We've also had problems with a device that cleans our air, takes the carbon dioxide out. And so we spent a day with one of my crew members repairing that piece of equipment. So those are the kinds of things that happen on board. And thankfully, we're so well trained by the people on the ground that we can get these things fixed.
Hi, my name is Jezreel. And what's the weirdest thing you've ever seen or have had happen in space?
You know, I wish I had a great story about these weird things I saw flying below us, but unfortunately not. I think One of the weirdest things I can see on board is how water performs. I mean, it's just water, right? But the weird thing about water is that there's no surface tension, or the surface tension, rather, is what keeps the water together, which makes it behave differently than it would on Earth. So if I can do this without making a big mess. So this big drop of water, let's see if I can coax it back up. To me, this is very strange, right? Water is not supposed to look like this. And it's not supposed to be inflated either. So that's an example of something weird here on board Space Station.
My name is Elise. Why do you choose to become an astronaut or work for NASA?
You know, it's a great question, because I think the reason that I chose to try to become an astronaut and then eventually be chosen as an astronaut was because I was inspired as a child when we had men landing on the moon many, many years ago. And it seemed like it would be such an adventure to fly in space. And it has been a tremendous adventure, but the thing that I've learned from this is that it's not simply the final bit of flying in space that was so neat. The adventure really was the path along the way. And so I'm very, very grateful to have had this opportunity.
My name is Jasmine, and what do you need to be qualified and chosen to go into space?
We know one of the main things is that you need to be healthy, because even though we're trained to do medical procedures here, we're not doctors, and we don't have all the things that a hospital would have. And so as a consequence, we have to be very healthy. But also, we have to be very well trained in all the technical aspects of our job, doing spacewalks, being able to use the robotic arm outside, because we capture visiting vehicles that have our supplies, and then all the different activities we do on board to include the science. Those are the things that we really need to know how to do.
Besides being an astronaut, what other types of jobs are there at NASA?
There are so many different kinds of jobs at NASA because it is a very large organization. And so there are astronauts, but there are the folks that train the astronauts. There are engineers that design and build hardware. There are people that support them with administrative duties. And there's people that take care of the facility at Johnson Space Center, for example, and all of the NASA centers. And so there's a wide variety of jobs in NASA.
Can we, as kids, go in space right now?
No, I am so sorry that kids can't go in space yet. I hope that someday all kids will be able to go into space. But right now, it takes a lot of energy for a rocket to get people into space and supplies into space. And it's a very demanding job, actually. And so I hope that someday it can be more of a leisure activity, frankly. You know, I thank you for all the questions. These were excellent questions. I can tell how smart you guys are. And I really, really appreciate the great work that KIP does. In fact, I have a piece of advice I'd like to give to all you students that are there at the Bullock Museum. My goal for you is for you to set big goals. And the thing that is great about big goals is that it will excite you, it will motivate you, and it'll keep you focused. And you can do tremendously great things if you have big goals. And I would encourage all of you to live by the motto of KIP: work hard, play nice, because it takes lots of hard work and getting along with others to do great things. Thank you so much. You guys are great.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Tim.
station. This is Houston ACR. Thank you. That concludes our event.
Thank you, Bullock Texas State History Museum. Station, we are now resuming operational audio communications.